In this week's video, I'll be reviewing this Bible. It is a Thomas Nelson Maclaren series King James Version Bible. This is in black goatskin leather. The box is a clamshell box, and on the back it gives you some information about it, which you can pause and read. Here's the ISBN, which you should be able to have seen on the charts as we got underway. The Bible is 9 15/16 inches tall, 7 inches wide, and 1 11/16 inches thick. Compared to a Cambridge Concord, it is wider, thicker, and taller. Compared to an Allan 53, the leather is roughly the same size, but the text block on the Allan is smaller. Not quite as wide, not quite as tall. And this new Nelson Maclaren series Bible is comparable in size to this Schuyler Canterbury below it. Very similar. This is a very flexible Bible. It's a limber cover. If we go inside, you can see that the text layout is in 2 columns in the classical verse-by-verse format. I did some surveys at my webpage, my YouTube channel recently, and this classic format is still preferred by a large percentage of people. It's not the majority, but still quite strong after all this time. Each of these columns is 66 millimeters wide, and I count about 44 characters per line. On some pages, you can have roughly 47 lines per column. You don't have that many, as many as you could possibly squeeze on the page, because you do have these page bottom references. The page dimensions are 235 millimeters tall, that's 9 1/4 inches, 158 millimeters wide, that's 6.22 inches. The text here is line matched, and that print is nice and sharp and bold. The margins at the top of the page are 13 to 15 millimeters. The inner margin is narrow, but it can be as much as 12 millimeters, that's a little under ½ an inch. Outer margin ranges from 8 to 10 millimeters. And at the bottom of the page, below the lowest descender of the references, it's 8 to 10 millimeters. The font in the text is advertised at 10.5 points. If you compare it to Times New Roman, the uppercase letters are about as tall as a 10 point, and the lowercase look to be about 11.5 points. I measure the line height at 4.26 millimeters. That's 12 points. So this line spacing is quite generous. Your capitals are about 10 points, and you've got about 2 points of white space there. Verse numbers are, as you see here, in blue at the start of each verse. This Bible does not include pilcrows like many King James Version Bibles do, so you will not see here any special mark for the beginning of new paragraphs. In the King James Version, words added by the translators for clarity, smoothing words are in italic font, and pronouns for deity are not capitalized. I was surprised in my survey to find how many people actually prefer to have pronouns for deity capitalized. I'm definitely in the minority in that regard. There are about 72,000 references. They're located at the bottom of the page. Again, here I was surprised with how many people actually prefer page bottom references. That, in my view, is the worst place to locate them. Included with the references are text and translation notes. The font here is around 8 points. It's a sans serif font, and the references are centered at the bottom of the page, as you see there. The paper here is nice. It's nicer than in some of the other Nelson editions that I've reviewed recently. Sheet thickness I measured to be 41.3 micrometers, which allows me to estimate the paper weight at 37.7 GSM. It is advertised at 36 GSM. The surface here is nearly matte. There's very little sheen, just sort of a diffuse glare, except for the reflection coming from the ink itself. The paper is fairly matte. The paper is almost white. My impression when I opened the Bible was that it was blue, but I think I was getting that from the blue ink on it. But when I actually put a sheet of white typing paper on top of it, it's very nearly white. It does have a little bit of a cast to it. If you look there in the gutter, you may see something that's almost pink. And perhaps you can't, but I can when I look at it in person. There is obvious show-through, but it's not annoying because the text is line matched. I haven't found any print non-uniformity here. Certainly nothing that you could see on camera. There are no book introductions with this Bible. Each book just begins on a separate page, and that's true even for the small books at the back of the Bible, like Philemon. As you see, book titles are located at the outside top of the page, as are the page contents. So the last verse on this page is Exodus 7:4. Page numbers are at the center top. Chapter numbers are large and bold. They span about 2 lines, and they are placed in blue. We mentioned the headings in the text. You can see 3 of them here in this shot. They are about the 10-point sans serif font, and they are printed in blue as well. So rather than having pilcrows to mark the beginning of new paragraphs here, you have sections. The sections don't always divide the same way the pilcrows divided the text in, say, a Cambridge King James Version, but I think they do a good job. Words of Christ in this edition are printed in black ink, the way that I prefer it. It was interesting that here I'm in the majority. It seems that most people also prefer the words of Christ to be printed in black ink, which surprised me. Quotations in the King James Version, quotations in the New Testament from the Old Testament, are not formatted in any special way, so they're a bit tricky to find. There is, in this edition, after the book of Revelation, you find simply a blank sheet with a note regarding the type. This is 2K Denmark type, and then there's no concordance, no map index, and I suppose that's done these days because concordance is fairly easily found online, particularly a King James Version concordance. You have 7 color maps. These are not especially high detailed. They are printed on a heavier paper with a glossy surface. You can see here the stitching visible in the map section, so you definitely have a sewn binding to go with your goatskin cover. At the end of the map section, you have some cardstock, and then as you can see, you have this tabbed in liner. So this is edged line construction. Here's the ISBN again, and that apparently is the model number 8976 BK. BK is for black. There's a nice line here that outlines the text block. And the goatskin cover, very flexible. 5 raised hubs here. We have 3 ribbon markers, 3 colors, black, red, and blue. Ribbon markers are double-faced satin, so they're smooth on both sides. They are glued in at something of an angle. I would say they're a bit crooked. They're wide, though. I like that. 10 millimeters wide. They're 32 centimeters long, and they are long enough to come out at the corner, and so they're useful that way. There is stitching around the perimeter of the goatskin cover. I suppose that's done for durability. This Bible will lie open in Genesis. It will not lie flat there, though. So we can open it up, and it will lie open here. Tends to want to close again. One of the reasons that it will lie open but not flat is there is overcast stitching here in front. In Genesis 5, the line of stitching that's right there alongside the gutter. As you can see here near the center of the book, we're in Psalms, the text tends to roll off down into the gutter. So if you have older eyes with lenses that magnify the text, you may have a shallow depth of focus, in which case you'll probably want to manipulate the text so that you can flatten the page that you're reading. If we look at the beginning of the book, we see the same edge-line construction. A little notice here that the cover is goatskin. I believe the liner is leather as well. It feels like leather and not like a synthetic material. There is a presentation page, which is on somewhat heavier paper. A half-leaf title page decorated with blue ink. It's from Thomas Nelson. Copyright page. This is the first printing in 2021, printed in the People's Republic of China. After the copyright page comes the dedication to King James, thought to have been written by Thomas Bilson. You have the dedication. In this edition, you do not have the rather lengthy essay, Translators to the Readers, which is thought to have been written by Miles Smith. Here are the contents. So this is a 66-book Protestant Bible, and the books of the Bible in abbreviation form, and then some special abbreviations that are used. So they use those abbreviations, and then there's an indication here that square brackets, that means square brackets in the references, indicate conceptual cross-references. We come then to the Old Testament, and immediately you are in Genesis. For some people, it's quite important to know whether a King James Bible is a pure Cambridge edition or not. There's a website where you can go to see a dozen or so locations that can be checked to determine whether your edition is pure Cambridge or not. It should come as no surprise that Thomas Nelson's King James Version is not a pure Cambridge edition. So here in Job 33:4, the Nelson Bible has Spirit in lowercase, while a pure Cambridge edition would have Spirit in an uppercase letter. The King James Version is a well-known Bible. It's probably the most popular still. So I won't go into any detail on these charts, but I do want to show you my translation continuum, where I've examined 200 verses and scored them for literalness. Literalness is not the same thing as accuracy. It just is trying to measure how closely the translators map source language words into the translated language words. Here is my Nestle Alland 28th edition versus Robinson Pierpont chart, where I look at the New Testament source. And as you can see, the King James Version clearly is agreeing with Robinson Pierpont to a high degree, which means clearly they're translating a Byzantine text most of the time. They have a good level of agreement with Tyndale House, right towards the right hand of the pack. And in terms of Westcott and Hort, the King James Version is one of those that agrees with Westcott and Hort very seldom. Here is the chart showing departures from the Masoretic Text. The King James Version is quite conservative there. It does not stray from the Masoretic Text often, unlike more modern translations like the New Revised Standard Version or the New American Bible Revised Edition. Some modern translations have sought to translate the Tetragrammaton with Yahweh, and 19th century translations, at least one, use Jehovah there. The King James Version uses the Lord all in capital letters. That still seems to be the preferred way of translating it, at least according to my informal survey. Taking now a close-up look at the text, you can see how nice and bold these characters are. Very easy on the eye. Line spacing is very good. Tracking is perhaps a little loose through here, but it's never too tight, at least as far as I'm concerned. Now for comparison purposes, I brought in on the right the Cambridge Concord, which has a smaller font, also a relatively bold font. You can see that larger font on the right may actually be easier to read, particularly for those of us who have aging eyes. Now I have brought in on the left, I may have said right last time, but I mean the left, the Allan 53. This is an old Oxford text block on the left, and both are very readable. The print on the right is more modern, of course, and it's bolder. I have to say, though, that I still prefer the font on the left just a bit. And for a final comparison, I brought in the Schuyler Canterbury on the left. As you can see, it's a larger font, but it has thinner strokes, and to my eyes, the font on the right is much preferable. So to summarize, this is really an excellent Bible. It's very, very nice. I'm not sure I've shown you the spine. Very flexible. Just drapes across your hand when you hold it open. Very soft. The grain feels good to the touch. Art-gilt edges, very nicely done. Ribbon markers are good, wide, and long enough to be useful. I wish they had been placed straight, but they're certainly functional. Paper is opaque, sufficiently opaque, that with the line-matched text. The dark, bold, comfort print font, excellent line spacing make this a very nice addition in my mind. I do wish that the columns had been more narrow. I prefer a narrower column. Most of the people who picked one choice among the location of the references, or I should say the choice of reference location most picked in my survey was page bottom. I personally do not like page bottom. I have great difficulty finding my way from the text down to the bottom of the page. And when these locations are sorted in a column, as they would be in the center column, or alongside the text in the margin, I find that a much better way to go. But I'm certainly not in the majority here. I would prefer also narrower columns. I find it easier to read that way, but I think a lot of people's brains are wired the opposite way, and so they prefer this wider column look. So paper and print are fantastic. There are not a lot of extras here. You don't find a Bible dictionary or a concordance. You don't find a map index. But you do have the Word of God in a classic translation, and sewn binding with art-gilt edges and a nice flexible goatskin cover. So all in all, I think this is a very nice edition of God's Word. I want to thank Thomas Nelson for providing this review copy in exchange for a honest review, which is what I've tried to deliver here today. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so if you're so inclined, and remember to hit the like button. Thanks very much for watching.